Hello, F1 fans. Welcome back to the F1 Masters podcast brought to you by AUBG Daily. As usual, you're with myself, Vasco, and Harry. And in this episode, we will be recapping the entire summer of F1 since we hadn't made any episodes all summer. We're here to give you a roundup of what happened and discuss the most interesting races and events throughout the season. First of all, we're going to begin with the teams and we're going to go in reverse championship order. So let's start with Sauber. Guys, what do you think about their season so far?
Disgusting, and I think I'm putting it mildly. From the beginning of the season, their car has been so far away from the rest of the grid, and even though their pilots are not that bad with Guan Yu Zhou and Valtteri Bottas, it is not even up to them. This car is really poor. They don't have a single point so far in the season, and they've been bad before the summer, and we haven't made an episodes in 4 months. 4 months later, they're even worse. And I think till the end of the season, we won't see any changes for them. So I'm not really excited about anything regarding them. And I think if from this point till the end of the season, there are only 18 cars starting on the grid, that won't make any difference.
We have to say that they appointed Mattia Binotto as team principal during the summer, which made a lot of memes throughout the internet. And also they confirmed that Nico Hülkenberg is going to be one of their drivers for 2025, which is a big change. And I think that this means that Guan Yu Zhou is not going to have a place in the team for next year.
I admire that they're trying to make some changes because clearly this team is incredibly dysfunctional this year. But I'm also looking at the results in recent races because at the start of the season, even though they were obviously still pretty bad, they were actually relatively close to the midfield, but then they really fell off. I mean, in the last 8 races from Austria till Singapore, their best result is 14th place, which really says a lot about not only they haven't gotten any points, but they've not really been close at all. And I think Guan Yu Zhou has actually been particularly awful this year. He usually finishes last or second to last almost every race, and I get that the car is bad, but he needs to step up and be on pace with Valtteri more often.
Does anybody remember when was the last time when they got out of Q1? That was in Belgium when Valtteri was 14th, and I think that is one of the few occasions actually when they got out of Q1. Imagine your car being that bad. They're the new Williams.
Everybody's just waiting for the Audi change 2026, because before that I think next year is going to be pretty much the same. Probably if the car doesn't develop, it's going to be awful.
Moving on to Alpine, and once again, not very impressive season from them. Esteban Ocon with only 5 points, Pierre Gasly with only 8 points, and overall, after the news that broke out yesterday that Alpine are not going to develop an engine for the 2026 regulations, I think the future again looks very messy for them, and everything is strange there, because a few years ago we saw a very prominent team that had the opportunity to disrupt this big three that was at that time with Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes, and right now we see a team that is gradually becoming worse and worse and worse, and I think that the future is not really bright for Alpine or for the whole organization, and they know this, and that is why they're trying to minimize all the problems that they have to face.
I was very surprised that really their season, in terms of, although they did start off really bad in testing, and they were probably maybe the worst team actually in testing, if I remember correctly. And I expected them to develop and be in the fight with RB, for example, for 6th place. But although at one point it looked like they were starting to get on track, they were getting some point scoring finishes. For example, from Monaco until Austria, they actually had 4 consecutive points finishes. But since
Also, the Netherlands, they had like a ninth place for Gasly.
ninth place in Netherlands and in Belgium as well. But yeah, they've been off the pace once again in the last couple races, and currently ninth in the constructors. To be honest, I don't think this team has ever finished this low in the constructors. So I think they can maximum achieve 8th place, but regardless, 8th or ninth, what an embarrassing season for them. And I still believe that they have a great driver lineup. And also, they announced during the summer that they're signing Jack Doohan, their junior driver. What do you guys think of that? Do you think he'll help change the directory of this team?
As he's a rookie, I'm not sure. Like, he will probably need some time to adapt, so it is going to be a difficult beginning for him, and I'm not sure if he's going to help the team anyhow, because they're a complete mess. They have changed, like, in the last few years, they have changed at least 5 or 6 team principles, which just speaks volumes about what a mess the team is right now.
For me, it's a bit of a mediocre choice, especially when you have other drivers available on the market. But I'm interested only and purely because he's a rookie. He's from their academy, and he may not be that bad. But overall, if they continue to develop cars like this, I don't think it would be helpful for the team to have a rookie that is in an unstable car, and for Jack Doohan, if he's in a super mediocre car that cannot even fight for a place in the top 10, his confidence will be ruined from the beginning, and this is going to be a pretty poor deal for both the team and the rookie.
I think Alpine just wanted to secure their own driver, since we remember what happened last time when they didn't want any unexpected tweets. So I think it was a safe choice from them and an opportunity to do something different. Moving on to the team in 8th place in the constructors, and recently actually been pretty solid. It's Williams.
There has been a lot happening at Williams. Maybe we have to start off with Logan Sargent, of course, because he had a difficult run of races. He crashed heavily in Zandvoort, and I think this just made James Vowles' mind, and he said, "Logan, you're out." And he decided to get Franco Colapinto, which was a very surprising decision for some. But I think Vasco mentioned last time, Colapinto is performing miracles in this car. He's amazing. He's very close to Alex Albon's pace. I think this was probably one of the best decisions Williams have made in like the last few years. And we also have to mention that they confirmed Carlos Sainz as their second driver for next year, which means that they'll have a very exciting lineup in Albon and Sainz. What do you guys think?
Well, he has been on board for, I think, that Singapore was his 3rd race, and he already has 4 points, which is impressive in my opinion in that Williams car. And from the beginning, it was visible that Colapinto is a much better performer than Logan Sargent, and I think that is one of the problems with Williams in the past few years. Yeah, their car has never been really good, but they also haven't had like a second really good driver that can push in every race. They've always been solely reliant on one person. It was first George Russell, after that it was Alex Albon, but the people next to them, it was Latifi, it was Sargent, it was even in the past Kubica, who hasn't been the same Kubica. And I think this is the first time since, I don't know, probably Massa and Bottas, that Williams have 2 strongly performing drivers that can give you the best performance of the car. And I think that is what they should aim for the next year. They have 2 even stronger drivers. They have Alex Albon, they have Carlos Sainz, and I think that is going to be the beginning of something really interesting in Williams. And I hope to see them like going back up the order of the grid, because they're one of the most interesting historical teams, and I think they deserve to be there, and I think they're doing the right steps. They're really small steps, but I think they're going into the right direction.
Yeah, they've been pretty much top of the midfield last few races as well, which is good to see. Also, one question about Franco Colapinto. Do you guys think he'll get a full-time seat next year?
Sadly, I don't think so, but I think James Vowles said that he is going to give Colapinto the reserve driver seat at Williams the next season if he doesn't receive a full-time seat at any of the teams. And I know that this is not perfect for Colapinto, but at least it is some start. It is a bit better than having no seat and no place in any team at all. And I think if any of the teams change their mind about their couple of drivers for 2026, Colapinto will be one of the top choices for all the teams.
Yes, I also think that unfortunately he's not going to get the Sauber seat, but for 2026 he's going to be one of the strongest candidates on the grid.
I only hope we don't get another Nick DeVries case. Really, because Colapinto seems like a cool guy.
He's done more than one race, at least, so bigger sample size. But let's move on to our next team, and that is Haas. 31 points at the moment in the standings, 7th place, very close to RB, and actually one of their better seasons in recent times.
I think the highlight for Haas has been Nico Hülkenberg. He has performed very strongly compared to Magnussen, especially because Magnussen, as we all remember, he had a difficult run of races. He was even banned for one race because of the many incidents, especially Miami was probably the worst weekend of his career, I would say. And that's why the contrast between the two drivers has been pretty significant.
I want to mention about Nico Hülkenberg, not only is he 10th in the driver's standings, which is incredible, he has had 6 points finishes, but also he has finished 11th 7 times, which goes to show he is always on the pace and always right there fighting for the points. Magnussen, obviously much worse season, but I think occasionally has shown glimpses of good pace, like in Austria, for example, or in Monza, even with a 10-second penalty, still managing to get points. I was astounded by that race by him. And also, Ollie Behrman came in for Azerbaijan and picked up a point as well, which is good, showing from the future Haas driver. Also, I think Ayo Komatsu has really transformed this team. It seems to be much more stable, and it is developing much better than it was under Günther Steiner.
Shout out to Nico Hülkenberg for his qualifying pace, especially. And we saw a couple of, I think he was 6th in
Austria and Silverstone.
Yeah. And overall, Haas also has been improving, and I think the next year we have a glimpses of something great awaiting for Haas, and I hope to see that development, and especially I want to see the end of the season, how they can get the best out of the car, and if we can see miracle performance from Nico Hülkenberg, if we see 6th, 5th place, that would be amazing.
My concern for next year is that their driver lineup is Ocon and Behrman, and we know that Ocon does not always have the best relationship with his teammates. He occasionally crashes with them, so that's why I think the inter-team relation may be a little bit tense.
I find it so funny that Ollie Behrman is ahead of Esteban Ocon in the standings this year, which goes to show the season that Ocon is having. I think it's a weird driver lineup, but Ocon is an experienced Formula 1 driver. I think he is a solid choice and does have pace when I feel like he's motivated. Right now, I don't see that motivation. I think that the fall off in Alpine has been so substantial that I think he's ready for a fresh start, and I think it'll work out positively for him.
What's even funnier is that Ollie Behrman is in front of K-Mac too, which is very, very, very interesting when we consider that Behrman has only 2 races in F1, and his second race was only a week, 2 weeks ago. But it is what it is for Haas and Kevin Magnussen. Not the best seasons that we've seen, but you know about the balls in him. I think we can go back to RB if you don't have anything else interesting to say about Haas, because RB has been quite interesting and at the same time mediocre throughout the whole season. I think the people focused more on whether Danny Ricciardo is going to keep his seat, because in the beginning of the season we had these discussions. Is it going to be Tsunoda or Danny Rick that will have the opportunity to switch Checo Perez at Red Bull if he's going to be, if they decide to drop him out? And going back into the future, right now, Danny Rick just raced in his last Formula One event, and Yuki Tsunoda, he hasn't been that bad, but he also hasn't been like really impressive throughout the whole year. And I think the situation in RB compared to what was it in the beginning of the season is pretty different now. And we're going to see what is going to happen with Liam Lawson switching Danny Ricciardo. But again, throughout the whole year, there has been like some bitter taste in all the RB fans about the whole situation and the performance of the car and of both pilots.
Yeah, just to give some context on the contrast really from the start of the season. From Australia to Belgium, which is 12 races, RB scored points in 10 of them, which was very impressive. But since then, they haven't scored any points in the last 4 races, which kind of shows downfall not only in development, but I feel like the team chemistry is kind of off as well. I mean, with the Daniel Ricciardo rumors, things really looked like they were falling apart. And USA is next with Liam Lawson, and I like Liam Lawson a lot. I think he's a great driver, and what he did last year I think was incredible, and I think that he actually will outperform Yuki Tsunoda in these last races. And if he does, I think RB should really reconsider keeping Yuki Tsunoda, even though I know he signed an extension. But Yuki Tsunoda has been at the same level since the start of his F1 career. There is no progress. If he's not going into Red Bull, why are you wasting the seat on one driver for what will be a 5th consecutive season?
It's not like I disagree with you about Yuki Tsunoda, but I think you're overrating Liam Lawson a bit, because he's not that good. He's a pretty decent driver, but in my opinion, he's nothing special. And this is like compared to what RB, or in the past it was called AlphaTauri, what they had with Albon, with Gasly. Right now, they actually have nobody even close to that level, in my opinion. Even Lawson and Tsunoda, they're pretty far talent-wise and performance-wise to Gasly and Albon as drivers.
I just want to say about Liam Lawson, because I checked his races from last year, and he drove 5 races, and Yuki Tsunoda only beat him in 1 of those races, which I think is a strong sign for Liam Lawson.
Well, we'll see what is going to happen to them, but overall, I think with the decline of Red Bull throughout the season, we saw a rapid decline in RB2, and till the end of the season, I don't really think that we expect anything spectacular from them.
I agree with what you said, guys, and I think we can move on to Aston Martin. When considering that Aston Martin were the 2nd fastest team at the beginning of last season, right now they're 5th. They can develop their car. They have a really mediocre driver in Lance Stroll, who is not even mediocre, I would say. He's just awful. Like, Fernando Alonso is, of course, like doing really well as he always does, but like Lance Stroll is a liability. He just seems to not, like, always not perform. What do you guys think about him?
There is something funny that Fernando Alonso can go to a team and like overperform the car and all that stuff, and again this team is going to be like in no man's land in the middle, because that is what Aston Martin is now. Aston Martin is the new Renault of what Renault was a few years back in time. And again, Fernando has a teammate who is not even close to him, who is not competitive at all, and we see a glimpses of great performances, great qualifying sessions from Fernando. We see some miracles in the races, but again, the car hasn't really been good enough, and Lance Stroll hasn't been competitive at all. Only when we compare their points, like this is 38 points difference gap between the two of them, and Fernando has taken like a big chunk of the points from the whole season for Aston Martin, and I think it is again a bit disappointing. We expected much more of them. At least we expected to have 5 top teams in contention before the beginning of the season, and actually we have 4 that are pretty close, I can say, and they've been even closer after Miami. And right now we have Aston Martin, which are always just scrapping for 8, 9, 10, and some miracle qualifying session where Fernando is going to start like pretty far up the grid. But again, nothing spectacular. The most important thing, I think, for the whole summer break for them and for the whole summer actually has been that they announced that Adrian Newey is going to join them. But apart from that, talking about performance on the grid, nothing really spectacular from them.
I absolutely agree. I think that Adrian Newey obviously will be impactful on this team. I don't know how impactful because this is still Aston Martin at the end of the day, and we don't know what Lawrence Stroll is going to think tomorrow. But I think people shouldn't get carried away in terms of expecting a lot of things next year, because that's when Newey starts working there, and he won't be developing the 2025 car. So I think 2026 is when Aston Martin fans can hope for something bigger. But for now, this season has been the most average middle of the pack season I've ever seen from them. Miles behind 4th, miles ahead of 6th, just pretty much all by themselves. And they had a few rough patches in the middle of the season where I thought their car was really going downhill, but they seem to have recovered. And once again, in the last few races, for example, Fernando Alonso, 6th in Baku, 8th in Singapore, incredible results, and pretty much further solidifying that 5th place in the Constructors.
I agree with what you said about Aston Martin, and maybe we can discuss about Adrian Newey a bit later as well. We can move on to my favorite team, Mercedes. They have had a few phases throughout the season. In the beginning of the season, they were like the 4th fastest car. They were like really a lot behind the top 3. Then from Canada onwards, somehow they improved. In Canada, they got their first podium of the season, and then they had like 3 wins in a row. Nobody expected this. Like Mercedes just came out of nowhere, which was like, for me, it was very surprising. I didn't expect this. And then after Belgium, they just disappeared. They're like, again, probably like the 4th fastest car on the grid, or like 3rd, I don't know, somewhere around Red Bull, which is really funny. I don't know why, but they just had like this amazing run of races, and after that, they're nowhere.
Yeah, just to provide some context, in Canada, they got their first pole position of the season, which was a big milestone. I just realized that was the qualifying session where George Russell and Max Verstappen set the identical lap time, which was the first time in, I don't know, I think since 1997, but I could be wrong. And yeah, they won 3 races, and I don't think, especially even until like Monaco, anyone thought that they would be close to wins. And I thought Lewis Hamilton was spectacular during that run, but he has had a pretty awful season apart from that kind of month in July. Just been in the beginning of the season. I mean, look at these results: 7th, 9th, retired, 9th, 6th, 6th, 7th. These were his first 8 races. And he has been pretty off George Russell in qualifying. And when you consider that Lewis Hamilton holds the record for most pole positions in F1 history, that is not something that you expect from him. But I think that the relationship with Mercedes is pretty much over at this point, and he seems to have lost the passion for this team, and I think he's just seeing out the season. And it's unsurprising that George Russell is having a better season, but I don't think many people expected George Russell to be as good as he has been this year.
And George Russell was actually disqualified in Belgium, which we have to remember because that is like a key moment from the season. But for Mercedes, it is that strange period. I'd be really surprised, and I expected them to like up their level to the end of the season, and I expected them to have something similar to what McLaren had, but actually they've just been like 3-4 good races from them, and after that again the same. I cannot say mediocre, but really, really average performances with. I think Mercedes fans got used to sixth, seventh, and eighth place throughout the whole season, and despite seeing glimpses of really good performances, especially from George Russell throughout the season, I think there is again that bitter taste of disappointment of what could have been this season, because there were a lot of opportunities, and I think Mercedes didn't grab like any of them.
I unfortunately agree with what you said, and I'm unfortunately getting used to the average results, as you said. And I think we can move on to Ferrari.
Yeah. One last note on Mercedes. I think that they're having a better season than last year, but it's so weird because last year they were second in the constructors and now they're fourth, and they're not even like that close to the top three. Like they're over 100 points back. Crazy. The competitiveness has just really risen this season.
And again, I think Mercedes fans are still shocked because from all the years of dominance of their team, and right now seeing this team just fighting for fifth, sixth, and actually not being really competitive to the top of the field, and when they take a win, it is a surprise win. And I think it's still a bit strange for these people, because after 8 years of dominance, it is pretty hard to go back to normal people, to, let's say, the peasants of F1.
Well, let's move on to third place in the standings, and that is Ferrari. We've had I would say, an interesting season. I think they started off really strong. The development was kind of lacking midway through the season. They had a failed upgrade in Imola, which proved to be very detrimental to them for pretty much the rest of the summer, with the likes of McLaren and Mercedes outperforming them throughout that period. But we've seen Charles Leclerc get 2 wins in Monaco and Monza, the dream for Charles Leclerc and for Ferrari fans, and also Carlos Sainz with his win in Australia. And it's kind of a distant memory that Carlos Sainz had such an incredible start to the season. I remember especially, I think Vasco was praising him as probably the best driver outside of Max Verstappen at the time on the grid.
Not the best, but for me, he surely was in the top 3, because in the beginning of the season we saw something special of Carlos Sainz, and don't forget that he even missed the first race of the season. I think if he was there, he would have maybe fighted for the podium or even further.
Yeah, and I'd say middle of the season, as I mentioned, really bad development, but then they turned it around. Charles Leclerc has been fantastic. I mean, look, his last 6 races, 4th, 3rd, 3rd, 1st, 2nd, 5th, with 2 pole positions in there as well. Incredible pace from him, and at one point it looked like they were in the constructors fight, but I think Azerbaijan, with the crash with Sainz and Perez, that really killed their hopes. And with the development of McLaren, I think it'll be difficult for them to get first, but Red Bull are still, I think, a good possibility for them.
I'm surprised actually from Ferrari, and I was laughing at them like on a few occasions throughout the season, but they haven't been that bad, and especially Leclerc upped his game after I think actually after we stopped making podcasts, he was like, "Oh, yeah, these guys they stopped making it. Nobody's going to to laugh at me, and that is my time. I'm going to up my game." And actually, he has been pretty impressive. I also think Carlos Sainz, he has been on a lower level, but actually with the quality of the car, he has also been alright, even more better than decent. And overall, I think Ferrari, if they continue to keep their pace like that till the end of the season, they can snatch the second place from Red Bull.
And we also have to consider that next year they'll have Leclerc and Hamilton as drivers. But we can discuss that later, maybe. Yeah, we can move on to Red Bull now. Vasco?
Well,
Silence.
it's not looking good, is it? I am really confused of what happened. Like I expected this to be another like pretty dominant season, pretty easy win both for Verstappen and Red Bull, but there was at one point just the things stopped clicking there. And even Verstappen, I think he's doing miracles with this car now, because fighting for a championship and constantly being a threat to the podium with this low performing car, I think it's impressive. But Red Bull, they've been lazy, and they've been overlooking all the problems that has been happening, and that backlashed them like really seriously. And actually they thought that they're so far ahead of everybody, and after McLaren did some changes, and out of nowhere Red Bull is the third, or in some races even the fourth fastest car. And again, let's start the Checo Perez hate again from me. Checo has been useless this season, and this is the least I can say about him. From the beginning, he had a few good races in the first 3-4 races, but after that, nothing spectacular. He is constantly out in Q1 or Q2. He is not performing great in the races, and you remember in the past, the Mexican Ministry of Defense, and he has been working so great with the tires. We don't see that anymore. Or even if he works great with the tires, what is the point of having like great work with the tires if you're 11th? And overall, I'm pretty disappointed from everybody in the team apart from Max Verstappen. Checo Perez, I think they should drop him. They're not going to drop him. And is this his fourth or fifth season in RB?
Fourth, yeah.
And he has been steadily declining in performance, and I'm just so confused and a bit enraged of what is happening in the team. Adrian Newey left, another important people left, like the head of strategy of Red Bull. He left to go to McLaren, and right now
Jonathan Wheatley as well.
Yeah. And right now things are just not looking good. I think they're out of the championship contention for sure in the constructors. I think most probably they're going to finish third if Checo Perez continues to be so mediocre and take only 0 or 1 points in every race. They're going to be third. I think Verstappen, solely because of his talent and his determination, he's going to win the championship. But in 2025, if they continue on that trend, I think things won't be looking good, and there must be some changes for sure.
Yeah, Max Verstappen, his last win was on the 23rd of June, and we are currently in October. It is dark times for Red Bull, and I actually think that Canada and Spain were two races that Max Verstappen shouldn't have won, but somehow managed to win them. And I think they will turn out to be crucial for his Drivers' Championship hopes. Also, podiums like Silverstone, Zandvoort, and Singapore.
Singapore especially.
All of these podiums are in a car that should not be fighting for podiums, and yet he is managing to consistently score good points, which I think will ultimately benefit him more, and he will retain the Drivers' Championship. Constructors, yeah, very tough. Ferrari look much better than them at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if they jumped them. Also, Sergio Perez, since Miami, his best result is a 6th place in Zandvoort. That is just tragic for a team that was, at the time, first in the Constructors' Championship. So Red Bull got a lot of things to work on, but I think it's only going to be downhill, and I think next year will be an even bigger crisis.
I agree, guys, with what you said. I've seen a lot of comparisons with Brown GP because the first half of the year has been amazing. A lot of wins for Max Verstappen. The second half, really disappointing. But I think that, unlike Brown, they're not going to win the constructors, unfortunately. But for the drivers, I think that Max Verstappen is going to still manage.
And going from a one-man show to probably the biggest surprise package of the season, and that is McLaren. I am pretty impressed from what they've done. In the beginning of the season, when we made our predictions, me and Harry, we were very positive about what is going to happen with McLaren throughout the season, but even our positivity wasn't going that crazy. McLaren currently first with 516 points. Since they made a few changes in their car, a few improvements, a few upgrades, they've been looking so good. Like, nobody even comes close to them. And Lando Norris, yeah, he had some problems, especially with race starts. But I think overall, they have two pretty strong pilots. They have the best car by a mile. And actually, I'm pretty impressed. I cannot even express how much of a surprise are they to me, because after a rough more than 10 years now, McLaren are finally back and they look on point to win the Constructors' Championship. And even right now, Lando Norris looks like a guy who has a shot at winning even the driver's title.
I think people forget how bad it was for McLaren the last 10 years or so, pretty much the entire hybrid era. I think people have really made fun of them way too much when considering where this team was even like 2 seasons ago. 2 seasons ago, they finished behind Alpine in the standings, and now look at the standings. Just complete contrast. They are the first team since 2016, like Williams, that are firmly within the top 3 standings in terms of Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes. They've had a chokehold on the top 3 for a long time, and a team like this, although historic, has not really been there at all in the last 10 years, and what they've done this year is incredible. And 2 great drivers, which is proving to be the difference in the Constructors' Championship. Lando Norris, I think phenomenal season. I think it's being underrated actually because of people's unreal expectations for Lando Norris. And Oscar Piastri, who continues to improve and impress me beyond imagination. Just, he drives like there is no tomorrow. Just his overtake on Lando in Monza, incredibly ballsy. And I mean, we can get into the team orders a bit later on, but I think overall, this team has been one of the most impressive teams I've seen in a long time. And also, if McLaren do win the Constructors, it will be their first Constructors' Championship since 1998.
26 years. This is insane. And actually, interesting statistics from... There has been only 3 races in the season so far that McLaren hasn't been on the podium, which I think is pretty impressive considering where they were in the beginning of the season. And also, I want to really praise Oscar Piastri. I think this guy is a world champion material in the future for sure.
I agree with what you said, guys. I'm not gonna add anything about McLaren because You said everything. We can move on to some of the moments of the summer. And we're going to start off with Charles Leclerc's Monaco win.
Well, yes, I mentioned earlier about Charles Leclerc's Monaco win, but finally the curse was broken. This was one of the first races to start the summer, and we couldn't cover this race, but although the race probably one of the most uneventful of the year, Charles Leclerc getting pole position and controlling that race from start to finish was really something to witness. He finally won his home Grand Prix, and I feel like at this point he should have like 4 Monaco GP wins. He is incredible at this track, just due to other circumstances he never really manages to get it done, but finally he has done it, and that really rounded out an incredible start to the season for him. And actually, people were considering him for a driver's championship fight at that point. And then races like Canada, Austria, Silverstone happened where he didn't score any points. And he picked it back up after that. But I think Charles Leclerc winning in Monaco on the podium, pretty much hugging it out with the Prince of Monaco, it was great to see. I almost shed a tear for Charles. He was so happy with this. I mean, I remember hearing the team radio and he was just screaming for for minutes on the radio. It was really special to see and one of my favorite moments personally.
I agree, it was a pretty emotional win for him. And we can move on to the Austrian Grand Prix, where we had one of the biggest moments of the season when Lando Norris and Max Verstappen had a big crash they were fighting for P1 and they didn't give each other that much space, and then George Russell just picked up the pieces. But let's discuss the crash itself. Vasco, what do you think about this crash?
Oh, it was very strange, and I think this crash, let's say it's that way, it summarized the start of Red Bull's downfall throughout the whole season, and this has been the moment when McLaren stated, we're there to fight, and we're not going to back up because you know what, we're better than you, and actually they proved it in the upcoming races.
Yeah, although I will say it was funny that in Austria, even with the crash, Max Verstappen still outscored Lando Norris, which is kind of the summary of Lando Norris' season and his championship fight. But moving on to a race that I actually believe is the best race of the season, and that was Silverstone and Lewis Hamilton's remarkable win, but not just the win, but the race began on dries, then went to wets, then went back to dries. It was all over the place, and we had 5 different drivers in the fight for the win. Really an old school F1 race that I hadn't seen a race like that in a long time. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the result was very satisfying in my opinion.
And also, in the end, we had even Lance Stroll beating Fernando Alonso, Nico Hülkenberg being 6th, like he's closest to ever being on a podium. No, just joking, but interesting qualifying session with Russell and Hamilton being on top. This was like one of these classic F1 races. It's like we were back in time 15 years ago with these mesmerizing F1 races where everybody was able to win and the competition was till the end.
We can move on to Hungary, where we had a pretty eventful race on the top. Like McLaren had some moments, they had to utilize some team orders, or
some papaya rules.
Yeah.
That race, I hated that the way that McLaren executed that. I mean, I don't know why they were surprised that Lando Norris was in front when they undercut Oscar willingly. And to the people that say, oh, they were covering off Hamilton, he was right there. Hamilton was miles behind. Like, McLaren were on another level that day. Absolutely unnecessary, and I think just total embarrassment of that team, and absolutely ruined Oscar's race. And Lando giving up points for, in my opinion, no reason. Because if you want to be a champion, you cannot let points like that for free. I mean, the team radio, remember how they were like, you're gonna need Oscar in this championship fight. Oscar in Monza is just like, what championship fight? I don't care. And so I think Lando should actually learn to be more selfish, because if you want to win the championship, you have to do stuff like that. And we've seen it from Max Verstappen, from Sebastian Vettel, from Michael Schumacher. The list goes on and on of these legends that have been selfish and criticized, but eventually do go on to win championships.
Something interesting actually about McLaren is that the only thing I think they lack right now is that championship mentality. And in both drivers, for Oscar it is because he's really young, he doesn't have that experience, but there are glimpses of like what he can do. For Lando, it is very strange. Like when he is up for the best result, there is something about him. I cannot even explain it, but I think you know what I mean. With his performances, with great qualifying session, and after that screwing up on the first lap. And with McLaren, like strategy wise, like what we should do we do team orders, or do we let everybody compete, or what we have to do? It is strange. It is like they have forgotten what is it like to be on top.
And we can move on to Belgium, one of my favorite races of the season, even though one of Mercedes drivers were disqualified. But he was a tire whisperer that day. He managed to make a one-stop strategy work out somehow. I was really impressed with George Russell, and I was very sad when he got disqualified. But still, Lewis Hamilton won, so I was happy as well. It was a really interesting race because they were like really close to each other at the end of the race. There was a fight, like Hamilton was pushing him a lot. Yeah.
Also, shout out to Charles Leclerc getting the most random pole position at the time. I mean, that car was unbelievably bad, and he managed to put it on pole.
Yeah, and I think after Belgium, we can move on directly to Baku, where we had one of the crashes of the season, I would say, because it was so weird. Sainz and Perez on the last lap. Vasco, what do you want to say about this crash?
Well, instantly when I was watching the race, I was like, Sainz, is this guy crazy? Is he insane? And after that, I watched a few repeats and I was like, but Checo was so stupid to do this. And after that, I watched it a few more times and I was like, both of these guys are super stupid and they ruined their race, because Checo was going for his best result for I don't know what, 10, 11 races, something like that. And with his poor form, even though he wouldn't have been on the podium with that result, it's still better to be fourth than being last with smashed car. But I don't know what happened with both of them, and doing that at the end of the race, I think the only winner from that was George Russell, who managed to secure a spot on the podium. But really, the whole race was really strange, with Oscar Piastri's win, with Lando Norris and Max Verstappen fighting, but strangely fighting between 6th and 7th place. But overall, I can say that the race was pretty entertaining, and the crash in the beginning was like that cherry on the top. Like you don't expect things like that to happen, but I don't know, probably this Latin blood in both of them. Nobody was going to be like, oh no, here, take my place on the podium. Oh no, you take my place on the podium. And in the end, both teams ended up with no points.
I think that also killed their constructors' hopes. Both teams, actually, they lost a lot of points that day. And now we'll move on to some things that happened during the summer that weren't race related, but we're going to touch upon them. And we can start off first with the news about Daniel Ricciardo officially announced that the RB officially announced that he will no longer be with the team and will be replaced with Liam Lawson. And what do you guys think about this entire decision to drop Danny Rick with 6 races to go? I personally don't really see a point to do it. I actually don't think, yeah, Danny Rick has not been anything spectacular whatsoever, but he's had a good amount of points, and I would say like one race Yuki Tsunoda is ahead, the other race it's Daniel Ricciardo. They're kind of, I feel like 50-50, especially over the last like, I don't know, 10 races. So I thought it was a strange decision, but what do you guys think?
Well, in the past few seasons, RB has been like really chaotic, and this is another proof of their lack of belief in their drivers. We saw it with De Vries, we saw it in Red Bull with Albon and Gasly, which were demoted to the junior team, let's say. And this is another of the problems actually. The junior team of Red Bull hasn't produced any in the past few years. There has been a really long time actually now that there has been a driver from the Red Bull Academy that has stepped into the RB car and has been like, oh yeah, I have one or two great seasons, and after that I'm eligible for that seat at Red Bull. And the whole concept of the team is really blurry now for me, and I'm a bit skeptical about the whole policy of Red Bull, their junior drivers, and everything that they do in this RB car. And yeah, right now they're promoting Liam Lawson instead of Danny Ricciardo, but why? Like, why? Liam Lawson is never going to get a seat in Red Bull, in my opinion. It's like 99% sure that he's never going to drive for that team. And in the end, you just switch some drivers, but you don't really have a vision of what you're going to do with them in the future. Like in the first place, Danny Ricciardo switched Nick De Vries at RB, and now he receives the same treatment, and RB, they have the same expectations that things are going to click, and I don't know what do they expect, like Liam Lawson taking podium places with mediocre car. That is never going to happen. Even if he gets like 2-3 points till the end of the season with that car, I think it's going to be like a great achievement for him. But overall, I think that Daniel Ricciardo losing his seat, having his last race in F1 ever, just sparkles the discussion of what the future holds for RB, because at that point I'm not really sure what is their whole point.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting case with Danny Rick and Liam Lawson. About like Liam Lawson not getting the Red Bull seat, I'm not sure. Maybe you're going to be right, but we can't be like sure about that right now.
I personally disagree. I think Liam Lawson is incredible, and I think he'll replace eventually Sergio Perez, if not next year, the year after that. And Max Verstappen is on the verge of leaving that team as well, so you also have to keep that in mind. But yeah, is there anything else you'd like to share for that? Or if not, we can move on to our last topic of the day, and that is Sauber and their last spot on the grid, the only team that has yet to announce. Well, RB haven't, but based on current form, it suggests that it will be Liam Lawson next year. But Sauber only announced Nico Hülkenberg, and there have been quite a few rumors around for many different drivers with this team. Recently, I've seen a lot of Valtteri Bottas rumors saying that he will extend, but other people that have been in the mix, likes of Theo Porcher, Gabriele
Colapinto too.
Yes, Colapinto, Gabriele Bortoleto, who is reigning F3 champion and currently championship leader in F2, actually a very impressive driver, among others as well. Who do you guys think is going to take this spot?
Unfortunately, based on like the latest rumors, I think it's going to be Valtteri Bottas, even though I don't entirely agree with this decision, because I think there are younger drivers who deserve this seat more than him.
I really like Valtteri, and I think he's going to take that spot in Sauber, but that doesn't mean that I personally agree with the decision, as Harry said, of Sauber, because especially Theo Porcher, I think I really like this guy. He has been really impressive, really talented, and he got that that case of being super talented, having shown the whole world what you can do, and that is not enough, unfortunately, to get an F1 seat. And people like Guan Yu Zhou, Logan Sargent, Latifi, they receive the let's call them the worst seat in F1 just because of their connections, just because of money they bring to the team. And with Theo Pourchaire, he is a Sauber Academy graduate. He has been really impressive. People has been talking for him since the age of 14, 15. And at this point, I think most people have forgotten about him. And I think even Colapinto currently has a bigger chance, if it is not Valtteri Bottas, to get that second Sauber seat, which is sad, but unfortunately, as I said, this is the F1 reality.
Yeah, I partly agree. I don't know if they'll for sure take Valtteri Bottas, but I think it would be very unambitious from this team if they decide to keep him. I mean, although veteran drivers, quite old drivers, and you know the maximum that they can take out of the car. And I think that drivers like Colapinto, for example, that have a lot more potential and upside could be beneficial to them.
The only thing for me personally in favor of Valtteri Bottas would be like 2025 will be again not the year where Sauber will compete with anybody, I think, but they would solely focus on development for 2026 for the upcoming Audi transition, and having two really, really experienced drivers can help you develop that car. And after that, they would think like, who is going to be the guy that would be leading the team from 2026 onwards? And before we finish, I have one last random question. Do you think that Sauber are going to get at least 1 point till the end of the season?
I don't think so.
No shot at all.
3 times no, you're out.
Maybe P15 if they're lucky.
Yeah, and probably some going into Q2 like only once because of a crash or something. But yeah, pretty miserable season for Sauber, but we'll see. Hope that is worth it when Audi comes to the sport, but we'll see. There is still enough time. And I think this would be all for today from us, guys. We're looking forward to the next episode. You can expect a lot of great things upcoming for all the races till the end of the season. Till then, like, subscribe and follow us in AUBG Daily on Instagram and Facebook, and stay tuned for more of our content. Thank you, and remember,
If you no longer go for a god that exists,
You're no longer a racing driver.